Nigeria's government has suspended its decision to remove subsidy on petrol. The government had planned to stop subsidy payments on petroleum products from July this year. Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Zainab Ahmed, announced the decision after a meeting with the leadership of the National Assembly.
Stating the fact that, let me start by stating the fact that we did make a provision in the 2022 budget for fuel subsidy for January to June. And that suggests that from July that there will be no subsidy. And this provision was made sequel to the passage of the Petroleum Industry Act that has made a provision that all products will be deregulated. Subsequent to the passage of the act, we went back and amended the fiscal framework that was submitted to National Assembly to incorporate this demand. But after the budget was passed, and we have had consultations with a number of stakeholders, it became clear that the timing is problematic, that practically there is still heightened inflation, and also removal of subsidy will further worsen the situation, thereby imposing more difficulties on the citizens. And Mr. President clearly does not want to do that. So what we have to do now is to continue with the discussions that we're making in terms of putting in place a number of measures, one of which is the deployment of an alternative to the PMS, which is the CND, and also the rollout of enhanced refining capacity in the country, including the 650,000 barrels per day Dangote refinery, and also the rehabilitation of the 4 national refineries that have a combined nameplate capacity of 450,000 barrels per day. The increased refining capacity in the country means we will need to import less products. But also, as we're discussing right now within the executive the possibility of amending the budget, we may need to come back to the National Assembly by way of amendment to make additional provision for fuel subsidy from July 2022 going forward, or whatever period is agreed is the right timing. So,
oil research.
Right. Your thoughts on this, too?
Well, it's somewhat confusing, but I guess slightly clarified by the fact that it's the same minister, Zainab Ahmed, who announced that subsidy will be removed in the middle of this year, that's now announcing the 180-degree turn. I think it depends on how charitable you want to be about this. It could look like the federal government is being responsive, is hearkening to the outcry from various quarters in this country, talking about the unnecessary hardship people are already going through in terms of galloping food prices. You don't want to add the removal of the subsidy, even though there was that palliative of 5,000 naira, the short-term thing, that would really not help in any practical terms. But it also does look untidy, because surely such considerations and such negotiations and what have you should have been conducted prior to coming out and announcing, making such a seismic announcement, because we all know that this fuel subsidy issue is always such a hot topic in our climes here. And it's really, okay, and to also be charitable, you could say that the federal government is not just signing laws into being without actually trying to implement those laws, that you can't sign the PIA into being, as President Buhari has done, without actually enforcing that law, which is why they decided to do what they've done. However, it does look untidy, like I was saying earlier. And now there's going to be, we have to go back to the National Assembly in July, when, you know, the budget 2022, the 2022 budget only has fuel subsidy up until June. They're going to have to make an additional request to the National Assembly. Already the labor unions are up in arms. And even now that the federal government has publicly and correctly, you've had Minister Zainab Ahmed and also the Minister of State for Petroleum, Timipre Silva, both saying that the subsidy removal is off the table. But still, the momentum has already begun from the labor unions, and they're still planning their protest on Thursday. So it does seem like the horse has already left the barn and you're now trying to shut the barn door, which is unfortunate. None of this would have happened at all if that announcement was not made prematurely.
Okay, the biggest challenge that we face in Nigeria is politics.
Yeah.
and how everything is determined by politics and the aspirations of the political gladiators within the arena. We have had cause to say that the administration, the Jonathan administration, of which I was a part, removing subsidy on January 1 in 2022. There are some analysts who have said, look, that was part of the reason the Jonathan administration lost the election in 2015, because it provided an opportunity for the special purpose vehicle called the All Progressives Congress to come together and form an organized opposition around that. So the persons who are there now, I think that what they have done is just to listen to, history, the lesson of history. Election is around the corner, 2023 general elections. And since the government proposed this idea of removal of fuel subsidy, there have been reactions, very strong reactions from organized labor in Nigeria, both the NLC and the Trade Union Congress, the TUC, who have even sent petitions to all the 36 state governors to say that this is unacceptable. They met before now, and they declared that they will shut down the country should there be any removal of fuel subsidy, what we call, more technically, deregulation of the downstream sector. Now, in an election season, no government that wants to win power will do that. So it will be like losing the election before the election. So some advisors within the ruling party must have advised government. And it's not surprising that, look, the people that met, the Senate president and all the key players there, they were majorly APC members. Now, when this has happened, petroleum marketers, the Petroleum Marketers Association of Nigeria, has been saying that, this is not a good decision that was taken yesterday. Well, the Petroleum Marketers Association, they are just beating their own kind of drum. But the APC was the first to commend the federal government, to say that the federal government has taken a good decision, because the removal of fuel subsidy will impose more hardship on Nigerians, which is true, perhaps. But it's interesting to see that the APC itself has become a wing of the Nigerian Labour Congress. But all of this is just sheer pragmatism, in my view. The economists, which is the argument put up by the Petroleum Marketers Association, are saying that this will discourage international investors. You will recall that the Bretton Woods institutions had recommended to countries, the low income, medium countries, the LIMCs, as they are otherwise called, that look, with the Feds in the United States planning to increase interest rates beginning from March, that's a big issue in the United States. And interest rates going up internationally, the dollar, going up and down, then developing countries will have to take a second look at what they do in their countries. And one of the recommendations has been the removal of subsidy. So there will be further implications in terms of how we manage this economy going forward. What has happened, it will look like, is that the Nigerian government, the federal government, has postponed the evil day. The next government that shows up in 2023 will still have to deal with the same issue about, revenue is our problem, debt is our problem, whatever. Okay, but President Buhari will have been safely shepherded out of the place. So it's a way also of protecting his legacy. He doesn't want to be the president that left, imposing greater hardship on Nigerians. So the evil day has been postponed, the president has been protected. And you see in that reversal, all the principal officers have been saying, President Buhari does not believe in subsidy removal. President Buhari is not part of it. It's Zainab Ahmed that is pushing for it. Okay? So they were removing the president, they were building it up. Maybe Zainab Ahmed also protested. Now they've used that to make the announcement that we will no longer remove the subsidies. All this is just a political gimmickry. And then beyond all of that is the issue of the budget. And to the extent that it's Ahmed Lawan who called the meeting and all of that, okay, maybe somewhere down the line, budget 2022, because it's an act, it will be revised. And budget, provision will be made for subsidy beyond July. But the question that Nigerians should ask is, where is that money going to come from? It simply means that we will borrow more.
Definitely.
To continue with the subsidy regime. And the NNPC, even as it becomes a limited liability company, we keep insisting that, well, there's no money that can come from the NNPC to the federal government. So give or take, there will still be greater hardship this year. But you will not be able to pick the government directly as scapegoat. So the campaign for 2023 has started. President Buhari and the APC, they are telling Nigerians we will not remove subsidy, we will not impose greater hardship on you. Don't be surprised. They will use it as a campaign subject.
I remember when this situation came up, I dared Rotus, and I think I put a dare out there. And I said, I dare the government to pull out subsidy a year before election. And I've been proven right. It's politics, not going to happen. But I think we should have a broader argument. At first, let's not deceive ourselves, because one thing I've seen is all of this is we deceive ourselves too much. This subsidy matter has been on since '87. In fact, this week, the magazine of this day put up a publication front page about subsidy squabbles as of 1987. It's been there for a while. When you go back historically, if refineries are working in Nigeria, it's not going to make any major change to the price of petrol. Let's not deceive ourselves. Because when you even see, as of 65, 66, 67, when BP built the Port Harcourt Refinery, there were variations in price of products across the country. So there was no price equalization. So the refineries coming on stream will not drastically reduce the price of petrol. Let's not deceive ourselves. And what we need to have is a concise conversation on our energy mix. It's too dependent on petrol. Can we use other things like CNG? Now they're talking about.
You mentioned that.
But you see, the CNG thing is, I don't like when people deceive themselves. Government has been hypocritical about the CNG thing. They announced the CNG thing last year. They were going to talk to OEMs to convert people's cars to CNG. Nothing was done. It's now that the subsidy matter came up. I keep insisting the best time we should have put out subsidy was that time that we had the chance during the administration of Goodluck Jonathan that he wanted to pull it out.
No, because President Obasanjo's time.
But President Obasanjo's time when the indices favored us. Now we have burgeoning inflation, galloping inflation and the likes, and there are problems. And the other part of the argument is the fact that it's definitely now at variance with the PIA. Because the PIA expressly states in its laws that price must be dominated by market forces. And the PIA talks about the deregulation, unbundling of NNPC. The PIA was to bring investors into the system, but because of that, we're keeping subsidies and we're at variance. So we're already violating our own laws as we speak today by keeping subsidy on. The most important question we should ask ourselves is, how far are we going to continue with this? Because here you can save an election, but the question is, can you save the future? What is the future? We must have a concise conversation on the energy mix in Nigeria. It's not just working totally dependent on petroleum. Secondly, we must develop more multimodal transport mechanisms. Metro lines must go across everywhere because people buy petrol for their cars and they get stuck in traffic because we don't have metro lines. So these are conversations we must have. And missing, just, evading the situation doesn't make the problem go away. The problem has been there since the 80s when the refinery started to decelerate in function and we had to subsidize and import. The problem is still staring at us in the face.
I guess, just one point, that if you get the refineries to work, you reduce the import bill. And all those, quotations about landing charges and all of that will be removed.
Dr. Abati, you forget you still buy crude in dollars.
No. If you produce locally, you are refining crude oil. We're talking about the refining of crude oil in Nigeria.
In Nigeria.
Now, but the private refineries, like the Dangote refinery, are going to give us 650,000 barrels. Dangote will buy at international spot.
Yes, that's what I say.
Those private refineries may not make a difference.
Yes.
But Labour is saying, get the 4 Nigerian refineries that are running at a loss, that have become a major wastage basket for Nigeria, get them working. They may not fulfill the expectations of Nigeria fully.
it's
But at
450.
least, there will be...
We are waiting, Dr.
There will be a reduction in
we
the
signed the
bills.
contract for turnaround maintenance with the Italian company for the Port Harcourt refinery. We are waiting. Time is ticking.
Well, those refineries can even be sold as scrap.
Oh, okay.
At this point.
That's all on News Headline. We take a short break. When we return, we'll have Michael Wilson, Adeso Omoro, Aaron Okeyala to give us updates on global business, COVID-19, and sporting activities across the globe. Stay with us.
Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. For Global Business Update, Michael Wilson joins us now from London. Good morning.
Morning. You'd be hard pushed really to see a more volatile session on Wall Street. Perhaps it'll happen again today, but that's certainly amazing sort of figures yesterday. I'll come on to the detail of it, but basically that means that Japan and Hong Kong stocks actually dropped. US markets completely volatile. It's selling off for all those kind of reasons that you would probably imagine, geopolitical tensions and the rest of it. Japan and Hong Kong stocks down about 2%. And as far as, the Hang Seng lost 2, mainland Chinese stocks down about 1%, the Shenzhen Composite down about just over 1%. And meanwhile, Singapore's central bank tightened its policy just a little bit. So it's joining the queue of central banks actually doing this. Let's talk about China and its internet giant NetEase. It's opened another studio, a gaming studio in Japan. It's pushing very, very hard to focus on developing high quality console titles, as it puts it, that will be released globally. It's focused on that, and it shows how NetEase is actually trying to appeal to an audience beyond China, where console gaming is popular. US recap then. All right, so the Dow down at one stage over 1,000 points yesterday, but they came back in again. They came back in about to buy knocked down tech stocks. I'm not exactly sure of the wisdom of that, but they did. The Nasdaq turned positive, as did the Dow, but futures this morning, even though that showed one of the biggest comebacks ever on the markets yesterday. Dow futures down 300 points and the Nasdaq down as well too. However, the Facebook Meta, its parent Meta, was up. Amazon and Microsoft closing higher. But again, this morning, well, who can tell what's going to happen? It may be another of those volatile days. European stocks generally not looking that bad this morning. As far as EU and Russia is concerned and the build-up of troops on Ukraine, it's worth just reflecting that the EU itself gets half its gas from Russia, and it might be that should Russia invade Ukraine, it might involve sanctions from the EU, which would backfire against Russia, because if Russia were to weaponize its gas supplies and the EU were to stop cross-border payments, well, that might be amongst possible sanctions, and that would stop people actually paying for Russian gas in the first place. UK government says energy bills crisis is due to global price rises, and basically they're not too worried about it because they think it's diverse and secure. I beg to differ. I think that any kind of disruption is going to hit international wholesale prices, whether it likes it or not. Let's turn our attention to Italy, and this is important as well. Mario Draghi, who is the ex president of the ECB, he is sort of a shoo-in basically for the new president of Italy. He's holding his hands up and saying, look, I'll just go whichever way I'm told to go because that's what I do. But Italy will rue the day. So it's the politicians, opposition and his own party politicians are saying if they get rid of a technocrat who's actually getting these kind of reforms that Italy needs to get through, if he's becoming president of head of state rather than being at his technocratic best, then it's not going to be good for Italy. Here in the UK, Boris Johnson has been rocked by new party revelations, this time a birthday party in Downing Street. This was during the first lockdown in 2020 when anything indoor was actually banned. He's also refused to say whether or not the planned national insurance, i.e. tax increase, will happen in April. If it does, it will actually add to the cost of living crisis in the UK. But his own party is asking him, and not just the opposition, whether or not that's going to happen. He still hasn't given a proper answer to that. The UK fraud minister, he's called Lord Theodore Agnew. He's actually resigned. There he is. And he resigned in disgust at what he described as the lamentable Treasury oversight of the fraud of the loans made out, the COVID loans, made out bounce back loans made out to companies, 47 billion pounds of them. They don't expect to get more than a quarter of that actually back, and he's therefore resigned. That's leaving it there. UK Unilever, let's talk about this now. Unilever, it failed in that bid to take over that consumer part that it was after from GlaxoSmithKline for £50 billion. I'd like you to think about a name which I'm pretty sure is going to be fairly high up in this, because this is somebody who is still investing in Unilever, thinks it ought to grow larger. He's called Nelson Peltz. And he's something called Trian Fund Management, which we're going to be hearing about a fair amount, I think, as far as Unilever is concerned, trying to make the company, which now employs 149, nearly 150,000 people worldwide, bigger, and maybe it'll go on the acquisition trail again. And finally, oil. I won't give you specific figures about that because the market's so volatile, but oil traders, needless to say, are on very high alert right now, whether it's for the upside or the downside. Brent's up 12% since the beginning of January, for no other reason than it's actually quite volatile right now. And once again, we wait for OPEC Plus to weigh in. I wonder what they will actually say. That's the global view this morning.
All right, Michael, I raised those concerns yesterday, and I'll pretty much have a deja vu moment by asking what happens if the SWIFT system of payment is disrupted in Russia because of this. And the second thing, what happens to gas price? And I asked those two questions deliberately because of what is happening in the world today as we speak. There was a message that came out of the UK saying they are very sure of the fact that Russia would definitely make an invasion into Ukraine at some point. America's pulled off their embassy staff in Kiev. And on the flip side, across the Atlantic, in America, share prices are going up. There's battles with inflation here and there. You know, there was a video yesterday of somebody asking, a journalist asking Joe Biden about inflation in America, and he used the F word on TV. I mean, conservative media picked that up, Fox News and all of that. They've been ranting about all of that. So what happens in all of this?
Well, right, here's the number one thing. A microphone is never turned off until it actually is. That's it. He didn't actually say it live. He didn't realise he was actually, as I understand it, he didn't realise it doesn't make it any better or any worse, but that's it. So a very important lesson for politicians who don't assume that microphone has been turned off, because it probably hasn't. So that's lesson number one. As far as inflation's concerned, well, I think Joe Biden's losing his grip slightly if he doesn't think that inflation's rising in the US. Yes, of course it is. And also the rising oil price is making shale oil profitable to actually mine as well. So, yeah, of course prices are rising there. As far as Russia and Ukraine's concerned, I think we'll just have to wait to see what kind of incursion there is. Putin is a black belt judo player, and the point about a judo player is that you don't. It doesn't necessarily mean that you've got to have more strength than your opponent. You've got to catch your opponent off balance. It can happen in milliseconds. He feels at the moment, I'm pretty sure, that he's caught the West off balance as well, because you've had all this different way in which NATO, the EU, and indeed the UK, and indeed the United States is looking towards Russia right now and seeing how they're going to deal with it. Can they still do something diplomatically? Yes, maybe they can. This has been going on for many, many years, and the Ukrainians themselves appear to be, even though they're signing up in their own private militias, they seem to be relatively calm about it. So it's very, very difficult to predict. I couldn't predict which way it's going to go. All we can do is, as I said to you, we look at the oil price and we look at its volatility, and the same will apply to gas prices as well. I don't think that any government anywhere in the world should be satisfied with the way things stand at the moment. Prices will rise.
Yeah, certainly. But with regard to gas prices, the concern in the UK that perhaps the tension between Russia and Ukraine could affect gas prices in the UK may not come to pass. The UK gets just about 5% of its, gas supply from Russia. It gets more from the North Sea and also from Norway. But the EU definitely will be affected because about half of gas supplies come from Russia for the EU. But the question is, how would Russia, in the face of sanctions, leverage its gas power? And what impact would that have? And what form will the sanctions that both the Europeans and the Americans are talking about look like? And what is the likely impact on the markets? Are the markets responding at the moment? Because while we see issues in Asia and in Europe, the US is on the rebound despite all the challenges that they face. So for us to think ahead, will Russia
do the same as they were against Russia? What you do is, what the sanctions would be stopping Russia and its oligarchs actually getting their hands on their money overseas. That would be the first sanction. Second sanction probably would be, again, it's only what I'm reading. I'm not an expert on this. I'm just saying that this is what I am actually reading right now, is that the payment system between Russia and the rest of the world, and between the United States, between the EU and between the UK, would be halted. So that means that they would not be able to take any money for the extra gas absolutely necessary. I get your point about 5% of gas, the UK being just getting 5% of its gas from Russia, but that isn't the point. The point is, I think that we have to look internationally and say that any kind of movement in gas prices is because of Russia is only going to go up. I don't know what they're going to do. They're trying to punch very much above their weight. In terms of economies, the size is only that of the UK. It's not huge at all, but it's an important pressure point. And I think that because everybody wants gas, China wants gas. Now, who's going to pay the most for it? Does that mean that prices will go up on the international gas markets? Yes, of course they will. So it doesn't matter really where you get your gas from. Yes, the UK does get a sizable amount from the North Sea. It also depends on Qatar, the United States, and for what it's worth, Trinidad and Tobago. That's where it gets its gas from. But that price overall for everybody will rise.
Okay, very quickly, just before we go, this is not business or economics. The new highway code that the UK is planning to introduce, would that also affect business?
I've no idea. We were talking about that the other day. I don't think I passed my driving test in 1966, which is a long time ago. The highway code, as I understand it, has changed an enormous amount then. I mean, the only irritating thing that I can see, it allows cyclists to travel sort of 3 or 4 abreast on the roads. I've not looked at the detail of it. I would expect that any change will mean that people have to learn different rules. Yeah, of course.
Okay, thank you, Michael. The year you got your driver's license, some people were still...
Michael,
we're still in another...
Michael, say that again. You passed your driving test in 1966. Okay, Michael. Thank you, Michael. Good morning. Don't say anything, Dr. Martin. For updates on COVID-19 pandemic, and this one, Marwa joins us now. And this is great to have you. And this one, I can see your head.
Good morning. I don't even remember where I was then. Good morning, guys.
Good morning.
Good morning, Adeswa.
Well, the global coronavirus caseload has now topped 354.3 million, while the deaths have surged to about 5.6 million. And, you know, every time I try to emphasize this and persuade us to look at these numbers beyond what they are. They're just not numbers. They are people, their lives that have been affected so far. And when it comes to vaccines, over 9.7 billion doses have been administered, and that's according to the Johns Hopkins University tally, which you have, or you should have on your screen any moment from now. That's the latest data coming from the university tally as at this morning. But here in Nigeria, let's look at the numbers. 241 new infections were reported. Unfortunately, 2 COVID-19 deaths were also reported in the last 24 hours from 8 states, as well as the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja, in Nigeria yesterday. In the latest performance rankings of governors and their performance, latest rankings of the performance of governors in the mass vaccination exercise against COVID-19 in Nigeria, the NPHCDA says the FCT, which is the Federal Capital Territory Abuja, Nasarawa State, Lagos State, as well as Delta State are leading on the second dose vaccination, with more than 10% eligible population in those areas now vaccinated. Remember, I told you, and I keep telling you, that Nigeria has a growing dropout rate for second jabs. If you take your first jab, it behoves on you to show up for your second jab to be fully vaccinated, and even show up for a booster dose, which Nigeria is now offering as well, as many countries around the world are doing. Well, with 100 cases reported every 3 seconds and somebody losing their life to COVID-19 every 12 seconds on an average last week, well, the WHO says it is premature to treat the pandemic as an endemic. Well, here's WHO Director General Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus speaking at a conference yesterday. Take a listen.
There are different scenarios for how the pandemic could play out and how the acute phase could end. But it's dangerous to assume that Omicron will be the last variant or that we are in the end game. On the contrary, globally, the conditions are ideal for more variants to emerge. To change the course of the pandemic, we must change the conditions that are driving it. It's difficult, and there are no easy answers, but WHO continues to work nationally, regionally, and globally to provide the evidence, the strategies, the tools, and the technical and operational support countries need. If countries use all of these strategies and tools in a comprehensive way, we can end the acute phase of the pandemic this year. It's true that we will be living with COVID for the foreseeable future, and that we will need to learn to manage it through a sustained and integrated system for acute respiratory diseases, which will provide a platform for preparedness for future pandemics. But learning to live with COVID cannot mean that we give this virus a free ride. It cannot mean that we accept almost 50,000 deaths a week from a preventable and treatable disease. So I ask member states to ensure the quality and quantity of your investments match your expectations. Entrust us with the resources to deliver the results you rightly expect. Let me put it plainly. If the current funding model continues.
Well, there you have it. Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus is saying that currently the World Health Organization has been set up to fail with the funding, and says we should not get ahead of ourselves, even though we have to live with the virus for a long time to come. To the UK, can Prime Minister Boris Johnson eat his cake and have it? Well, he's been accused for yet another party lockdown COVID-19 rule breaking. According to his office, it was a surprise party organized by his wife that lasted 10 minutes. Prime Minister Boris Johnson. The new allegations come as we await the investigation outcome of senior civil servant Sue Gray. I wonder if we can truly eat his cake and have it. Meanwhile, starting February 11th, fully vaccinated travelers and children under the age of 18 can skip testing, according to the British government. Travelers who aren't fully vaccinated still need to test before leaving for the UK and within 2 days of arrival, but they won't have to self-isolate unless they test positive for COVID-19. The government says the country is open for travel and business. And finally, the International Council of Nurses, a body representing over 27 million nurses worldwide, yesterday raised serious concerns about global shortage of nurses to the pandemic. The body says the Omicron-fueled wave of COVID-19 infections has led wealthier countries to intensify their recruitment of nurses from poorer parts of the world. According to the head of that organization, he says Western nations dealt with the problems initially by bringing back retirees and volunteers to workforce, but now Rich countries such as the United States, Germany, Canada, and Britain are offering nurses from poorer countries more money to come over. Well, he says this situation will lead to a shortage of nurses, of course, and the COVID-19 pandemic will worsen healthcare problems for poorer nations. They couldn't have said it any better.
Now they are draining our nurses.
But
it's just sad that we don't think about how to keep our nurses and our doctors here. There was a stellar report done over the weekend by Femi Akisoya. It was a very powerful report on the brain drain, how a lot of Nigerians left the country. You know, on the flip side of it, some will argue that they are part of the foreign direct investment we get. But on the other side, we need them here because the numbers are quite really startling. I think you have one doctor to about 40,000 patients in Nigeria, and some other parts of the world, you've got one doctor to about 396 patients. But kudos to, let's say kudos to Britain, the UK. On the 11th of February, new regulations will kick in. They're opening up the economy because I've always, posited the fact that we have to learn to live with COVID. And this is just one of the ways to live with COVID. Because, yes, it's already endemic. We'll have it amongst us. Then we'll observe the necessary pharmaceutical measures and we'll deal with it and we'll triumph on the other side. So kudos.
Well, regarding Boris Johnson, I do wish, and he might wish it as well, that he just gotten ahead of this whole situation, admitted to all the parties, full disclosure, apologized, and perhaps by now would all have moved on. But this little drip of accusations and revelations is extremely damaging for him. And the only hope he has is really just to come clean, because this whole idea that there's nobody really waiting in the wings to take his job is not really the best thing, because that's a huge assumption on his part. Anybody could emerge if there's a vote of no confidence, and he simply has to go. This latest drama is about his birthday party with that Union Jack cake, and I'm sure he wishes that they hadn't done that for him. He'd already gone on a school visit that day and been presented a cake at school. Why did they feel the need to have 30 people over and then now have another event upstairs in his flat, which he's denying, his private residence, which is another breach of the COVID rules at that time, which he's denying and saying the event that they had was in the garden. Neither here nor there. It's really looking like he had one rule for others and another for himself. And I just don't know how he's going to escape from this. Even if there is a vote of no confidence and he survives that, like Theresa May did, she was mortally wounded and she did not survive much longer beyond that. So I think this is it's not going to end well for Boris Johnson, unfortunately. And with regards to the nurses, it's up to those who are what's called poorer countries to increase salaries, to improve working conditions, to retain people. A lot of people who go abroad in the medical field, it's not like their childhood dream to live abroad. Most people do want to live in the country that they're from with their families. They have elderly parents they want to take care of. They have all kinds of commitments within their communities. But they're driven out for economic reasons and also about quality of life. So while, yes, it is presented as a moral issue of the richer countries constantly oppressing poorer countries, the poorer countries as well do need to take cognizance of the fact that we are losing our best, not just in the medical field, in every field really, because we just cannot get our acts together. And whose fault is that? There's only a certain extent to which you can blame other people for your own misfortunes, I feel.
Well, even before COVID, let me take off from that point. There was a global shortage of about 6 million nurses. And, going to UK, Canada, Australia, and other Western countries was a major attraction for nurses and other medical personnel from developing countries where the conditions are poor, where the wages are poor. And so when they are confronted with the possibility of better life in other parts of the world, they jump at it. And, they, in addition to that, it's a preferred immigration status. And that is why, over the decades, we've had, brain drain in the medical sector, with Nigerian doctors queuing up at hotels to be interviewed for better jobs in Saudi Arabia or in the US or in Canada or elsewhere. What has happened is that COVID, has exacerbated this situation because of illnesses attacking the health sector in some of these countries, burnout, absenteeism. So these countries need more personnel from other parts of the world. In some cases, in the US, in New York, and other places, the first approach is to draft the military to get into the medical space to help. Now, the other option is to recruit internationally and provide incentives. But the major concern about this is that all of this is in the context of complaints, concerns about global inequity. So if you have nurses going from developing countries that do not even have enough personnel to the Western world, then of course, that whole imagery about inequity in the world in the face of a pandemic is written large. And that, again, deepens the dilemma of the developing countries that do not have enough, and the little that they have, they continue to lose. And in the age of globalization, labor will follow the money. Labor will follow the trail of good conditions. As for Boris Johnson, well, this week, the Sugre investigation report will be released. And there is anxiety that, in fact, that may be even more damaging than what we have been told. Yes, it was his birthday on 19 June, and the report in the papers about how, Nero was fiddling while Rome was burning, and two different sets of rules have been provided by the people, have been refuted by one of the spokespersons from number 10. But if you look at the refuter, it doesn't amount to any kind of refuter, because she admitted that indeed there was a party in the afternoon attended by about 30 persons, and that in the evening, the Prime Minister invited people to his apartment upstairs. So Boris Johnson faces a moral dilemma. Will he survive it? Well, we'll know the extent to which all of this is bad for him when the Sugre report is out there in the public domain. Now, as for Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus, yes, his emphasis was on the fact that, look, this Omicron variant has been very devastating. In 9 weeks of the Omicron variant, over 80 million people have died. 100 cases of infection within 3 seconds, and people have been losing their lives within 12 seconds. Now, that is higher than the total average in the whole of 2020. And so he says, well, while vaccination is important, people should continue to vaccinate, but we should also look in the direction of global solidarity. And at that press conference that is on the screen, he singled out Germany for special praise, the highest donor to the WHO for the commitment of Germany. And he went further to say, yes, while vaccination is useful, there are other ways in which we can help the world. The rich countries providing support, both in terms of therapeutics and diagnostics, for developing and less privileged countries of the world. And I think he's been consistent in this regard. And his emphasis on strategy, on a strategy to address this, pandemic, which is right in saying that it will not go away very soon because the enabling conditions are still prevalent in different parts of the world. But the good news, of course, is that the scientists, are not resting on their horse, and they are making every effort to stay ahead of the pandemic and the various variants emerging.